Wellness is a practice, not just a word.
Welcome to the Synergy Podcast, where myself, Kelly Engelman, and Lori Essery shed light on powerful tools and topics that nourish your body.
And most importantly, feed your soul.
Welcome, Synergy listeners. We are so privileged today to have with us Dr. Jim LaValle. He is a clinical pharmacist. He's an author of over 30 books, and they are rich and deep and wide. He has been on faculty at the George Washington University Integrative Medicine Department for many, many years. And the way Lori and I got to meet him was actually through A4M. He's responsible for a lot of the curriculum through A4M, and we became groupies early. We are early adapters and followed him around to all. If we knew Dr. LaValle was lecturing, we were in that class, and we got to know our friendly A4M staffers really well, so they would let us sneak into classes when we weren't supposed to be in that class. Because we needed to hear what Dr. LaValle had to say. And Dr. LaValle, I remember my very first encounter with you where I stood in that long line that we get in after, a lecture to ask a question. And I got up to ask my question, and I was completely speechless. I couldn't get my words out. Like nothing would come out. And you were so patient with me. You just sat there, you helped me find my words. And I knew then that you were just an incredible human being. So we are so honored to have you here today to share all of your rich wisdom with us.
Well, thank you so much. And, if you're a good teacher, you need to be a good listener, and you're supposed to pull things out of your students. So I think that day I had to pull something out of you, but it worked out. It was all good. It
worked out. For a few lectures, I was a little bit shy. I would write notes to Lori, and I would just hand them to her. And I would say, just ask this. I'm not even going to try today. I don't feel good. So the fact that we're sitting here having a podcast and we can actually have a conversation, I think is progress.
It's absolutely wonderful. And you didn't even need to be medicated.
Really? Actually, my team told me I should have a mimosa before the podcast. I chose not to because I didn't want to be sleepy or giddy or any of those things. But yeah, they told me to medicate.
All right.
I just want to second that. I am incredibly grateful to have you on here today. And yes, we have sat in hours and hours and hours of lectures, and you have been extremely gracious with your time. And I just want to thank you for carving out time today to talk about some of the most important things that Kelly and I get to see in our clinics, but is at the heart of its blood sugar metabolism, and so much more, because we know it's not just glucose. It's a far bigger picture than that. So we're going to dig in today and challenge you a little bit. And yeah, it's good stuff. You probably won't be that challenged, but we're going to challenge you as much as we possibly can, because these are burning questions that we have, and we want to know if you're seeing it and what are you seeing. So I'm looking forward to digging deep with you today. So thanks so much for being here.
Oh, my pleasure. Let's go. I'm excited.
So before we get into questions, we really want to know your backstory. What's the story behind the story? What drives you to be involved in this functional space to the depth and breadth that you are?
Well, I was always into it at an early age. I had cousins importing dietary supplements from Germany and selling them to physicians in the 1970s. But what really influenced me was my grandmother was a fingerless, toeless, blind diabetic. My father was diabetic. All my Italian aunts and uncles were diabetic. My grandmother used to feel my face with her, little amputated little fingers to see how I had grown, right? Which kind of scares you when you're 6 years old.
Yeah.
But the fast forward to that was I just got out of pharmacy school. I'm in the roughest neighborhood. Back then I was big. I just won the national qualifier in bodybuilding. I said, we're going to put this guy in the roughest neighborhood in the Midwest because nobody's going to rob him, right? And now, this is no joke. And so, they boarded and had all kinds of steel curtains for this store, right? It was a Kroger store. And at about 5 till 9 at night, a woman comes in, gives me her prescription for diabetes medication. I can't believe we're going to talk about glucose because this is what's driven it all for me. She gives me that medication. I go and fill it. She comes back. I look in her grocery cart. I just looked at her. I saw my grandma. And I said, can I show you around the store? Wasn't supposed to do that, by the way. I wasn't supposed to leave the pharmacy. But I showed her around the store, showed her some better options. She was very grateful. Things that she could afford to change. Next 2 weeks in the roughest neighborhood in the greater Cincinnati area, I had over a dozen people come in wanting the grocery store tour. And the roughest neighborhood. Now, but here's what ends up happening. I go to the president of Kroger's. I say, I want to tag foods for low sugar, for diabetes friendly, heart health. I want to test people for blood sugar. I want to test their lipids, cholesterol health with, shopping at Kroger's. 1983, I'm doing this. And he looked at me. I got into the president of Kroger's, which is, I had a ponytail and an earring back then, right? I mean, I was like, how did I? Yeah, he said, "How'd you get in here, boy?" He's like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to tell some of our biggest food vendors that their foods don't qualify. Just get out of here, right? So he throws me out. And I go to my marketing area manager, who is a pharmacist, and I said, "Look, I want to tag foods. I want to bring people in, have wow events." And I went through the whole store and tagged foods individually. We tested, found more diabetics than anyone in the country. We sold more glucometers, and it pioneered food tagging within Kroger's, which created 2.7 million impressions a month about eating healthier. That was 1983. And what it did, I still get pretty choked up about it. I mean, every time I tell that story, when people ask me what really got me going was, you never know who it is you're going to reach out and touch and how it's going to make a difference. Like, she was a Medicaid, inner city. Man, there was no reason for me to take that effort. And being a young guy out of school, I didn't know any better. I just like, hey, I'm going to try and help you. And that's what fueled my career. I realized that you can be a service. It only takes one person to impact millions of lives.
Wow.
And is why why I go to A4M is there's somebody in that room that I'm going to speak to that's going to change millions of lives. And I'm positive of it. And that's what drives me.
And that's one of the reasons why we truly love you, because that speaks through you every time you talk. And, our stories, although I can't say that I've seen that come alive in a grocery store setting for me, but I've seen that come alive in the clinic. It's almost like this tsunami effect for change, right? With one person.
Right.
Your story really resonates with me deeply because I'm that Italian family. That is my story. Diagnosed at, 25 years old with diabetes, yet I was a marathon runner and none of it made sense. And, like we're going to talk about today, what we know today about the significance of glucose control. We did not know then. We were seeing it, but we didn't have the data. We didn't have the research. And now we do. It's just crazy. But congrats on that change and just what that did to get you where you are today.
40 years now. I mean, it literally took me on a journey of 40 years of being in this business, and started writing right away, and left pharmacy and went into more clinical pharmacy, and, got all my other, certifications and degrees. It's been quite the journey. It's interesting when you cross the 60 threshold. Like I've well crossed it. You start looking back and going, man, what a ride. I mean, I see examples. I mean, we're talking about diabetes, and the one thing I want people to understand is it's never too late. My father was 79 years old when he was diagnosed with a duodenal adenocarcinoma, very rare, but he was diabetic, poorly controlled diabetic since the age of 38, world famous chef, top 100 chefs in the world, right? They do a Whipple surgery. So if you're listening on the podcast, a Whipple is the biggest GI surgery. Then they take out the lower third of your stomach and your duodenum, and they take off the top part of your pancreas. He didn't have pancreatic cancer, but typically a surgery like that, somebody lives 3 or 4 years, right? Somebody 79 years old getting that kind of surgery. He came to live with us, and the first thing I said to him was, "Hey, Pop," because he's a little Italian. I mean, literally, a little Italian. I said, "Hey, Pop, guess what? Party's over now."
Welcome to my house.
We're going to eat my way. Well, and I'm going to tell this to people to understand, he wasn't given much hope, right? He lived an additional 13 years. He lived to 91 years of age. by improving his diet and doing strategies to control glucose more efficiently, understanding the underlying mechanisms in him that was causing him to have this inflammation, cancer signaling, glucose issues. And, he championed it at age 79. He had to do it. I mean, I could point the way for him, but he did it. And he got to see his grandson grow up, and he got to go and enjoy, hanging out at the senior center and the VFW. And so that's why it's so important for us to talk about this, because, glucose disorders, principally diabetes, it's our number one healthcare crisis. I don't care what anybody says. It's number one. It's at the top.
Agree.
Yeah. So what do you think is driving that? Tell us some things that you think are key things that are driving the tsunami effect of poor regulation of glucose.
Well, how many hours do we got?
I know, right?
We can make a part two.
I wrote a textbook called Diabetes and Cancer, Epidemiologic Evidence and Molecular Links.
What year was that?
That was like 2006 or 7 when I first identified like the mitochondrial effect of glucose regulation, so if we boil it all down, let's start from the inside and go out, right?
Sure.
If you boil this all down, really what happens when you're a person with diabetes, you end up no longer making energy packets good in your body anymore.
Right.
Every cell in your body now is only making 2 packets of energy instead of 30 plus. You make a bunch of waste product called lactic acid. The lactic acid turns your cells into acidic environment. And that acidic environment, the cell has to survive. And so it induces changes in your genes that allows you to survive in an acid environment. The problem is those changes end up triggering cancer in many cases. And that's why people with diabetes feel fatigued, put more fat on their muscle. I always say, people with diabetes are Wagyu 5. They're great Wagyu, man. They got marbled muscle because they're inefficient at storing nutrients and storing glycogen for energy, and they are super efficient at storing fat. And so, well, why does that happen? So why does the mitochondria become a problem? Well, back in 2001, I started writing about this, that there were various factors related to it. So the first one, you can't get around it, it's diet. And I know everybody now is on the paleo, vegan, FODMAP, fruitarian, carnivore diet. And I'm not sure how you do that, but I'm pretty sure they're on it. So I think there's a lot of things that get missed. Diet doesn't have to be that difficult. Sure, as people get more sensitive to diet, you have to restrict them for a while, but then, you work on building them back up.
That's right.
But diet is key. We ate, so you said, what was one of the big things? We eat really energy dense foods here, right? So energy dense foods with not a lot of micronutrients in it. We eat too often. We eat too late. We eat too much. We eat too often, too late, too much. We never allow our body to go into cleanup mode, known as autophagy.
Right.
And then we get under a lot of stress and we don't get enough sleep. And that's just the start, right? So right there, that's number one. Like what revolves around food is inappropriate eating times. Yeah, if you're Italian, right? If you're Italian, you know this one, right? You eat breakfast at 7. You have lunch at noon. You eat dinner at 5 with your family. And if you're a good little Italian boy, you get something at 7. But after that, the kitchen's closed and I better not find you in there. That's the way traditional cultures would eat, basically on a 12-12 schedule anyway. If you go to France, I don't care where you go. So anyway, that was important. And then I think it starts to get into, so food selection, too many carbs, too many carbonated drinks, too much sugar, so people think they're supposed to drink a green drink. They go and buy a green drink and it's basically pineapple juice with some green food coloring, right?
Right.
Right? That means 88 grams of sugar. You may as well drink 2 Cokes, shotgun a couple Coca-Colas, at least you'll get the caffeine, right? I mean, that is such a big issue. People, I think because of the amount of stress they're under, they're wanting that serotonin hit.
Right. One of the things you said, though, is you referred to diabetes. And I want to go back and just clarify, because do you really have to meet criteria in traditional medicine of diabetes to have all of these things happening?
No.
Right.
So tell us about that. Let's take them on a journey of like how this whole cascade presents itself clinically for a patient.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
That's what that whole book was about, was we mapped out every cellular step. So let's start with just the fact of if you're under stress. If you're under chronic stress, and how do I know if I'm under chronic stress? Well, do you feel overcommitted? Do you feel anxious? Are you craving carbs or sugar? Do you get home at night and all you can think about is mowing through a row of cookies? Or I'm gonna munch on a chocolate covered pretzel with bacon and caramel and sea salt, right? It's that thought of hedonic urge. So stress triggers that need for reward. So that's one step. But more importantly, when you're under chronic stress, long before you're diabetic, look, when you look at the Kaiser Permanente study from 2015, for every point over 84 was a 6% risk of being a person with diabetes. And then once your blood sugar was 90, you were damaging your microcapillaries.
Right.
And that you're solidly in the normal range. If you're walking into a doc's office most of the time, they're going, oh, hey, man, you're at 92. You're all good. Oh, well, yeah, you're 35 pounds overweight. You've got a lot of visceral fat. You're pre-hypertensive and your lipids are high. All a byproduct of your sugar being off, which we're going to get through why that happens. But hey, you're not diabetic.
But let's put you on a statin.
But let's put you on a statin. Exactly. There may be something for your blood pressure, but you want a little losartan or something, a little lisinopril, whatever, But so when you're under stress, you start making more inflammatory cytokines. And nobody would have known what that name was before pre-COVID, right?
Right.
Now everybody understands the term cytokine storm. So inflammatory molecules getting thrown off in your body too frequently due to the upregulation of cortisol in your body, stress. And then as you think of as stress progresses, the more you stay in fight or flight, the more you sustain fight or flight, the more you train your body to be in sympathetic stress. I'm making more adrenaline. And when I start making more adrenaline and my cortisol levels are high, I start releasing more interleukin 6. Now, there's two things that start to happen with it. One is interleukin 6 and TNF alpha, both of them, hit the insulin receptor and basically turn off the insulin receptors. So you have something called insulin receptor 1, IRS1, and IRS2. And these two kinds of insulin receptors that are hanging out, trying to make you efficient at burning blood sugar. When you get under stress or you make a lot of inflammatory cytokines, you could make inflammatory cytokines due to environmental exposure. Right. Or maybe you're somebody that works out too much. Or maybe it's a mold exposure. It's something within your house that caused the problem. So whatever the reason, you make these inflammatory compounds, and now your body goes from literally the insulin receptor being able to open up and accept the insulin that has been released so that your GLUT4 transport can take in glucose and make all those beautiful packets of energy, 30 plus packets of energy, right? When you make too many inflammatory compounds, that doesn't happen.
Right.
And instead you go through GLUT1, predominantly. And there's other things that are going on. You've got incretin hormones and you've got hunger and appetite hormones. There's a lot of stuff that's happening at the same time. But when you get down to it, metabolic inflammation or metaflammation drives your insulin receptors not firing. And now the glucose passively absorbs into the cell. And when it passively absorbs into the cell, you go through aerobic glycolysis. You start making a lot of lactic acid. It's almost like becoming a gas burning SUV. You're sucking gas. You're a 2-mile gallon person instead of a Prius, right?
And what that feels like to a patient is what? Fatigue, achiness, stiffness. I just don't feel well, right?
Well, they don't have any energy, right?
Yeah.
What's the number one thing? I mean, look, 50% of our population is going to be obese in the next 10 years, right? Even with the advent of all the drugs, because we're not really teaching people a lifestyle. It's not just about injecting, Ozempic or Manjaro, right? It's, well, how do I maintain my lean mass? And so people will complain. And we've seen this, right? If you all you do is tell a person with diabetes, hey, I want you to eat better and exercise, they'll go, oh, thank you so much. I didn't know that. They don't feel good enough to exercise. And the other part is even when you're really good at explaining it to them, the problem is on the way home, they're running out of energy already. And so they have three choices. They can stop at the broccoli shop, which there aren't many broccoli shops. They can stop at the bakery, which is a bakery on every corner, or they could stop at the liquor store. There's a lot of liquor stores, or there's fast food. And so their metabolism is driving for the quick hit of energy. So one of the biggest things that I think we've just never really gotten right in healthcare is how important it is to manage people from the inside out. When people have energy, they can make better decisions. When people have energy, they think clearer, meaning when your mitochondria is functioning well. Because when your mitochondria don't function well, now all of a sudden I've got more inflammatory compounds, the insulin receptor doesn't work, your thyroid hormones get lazy, you can't make neurochemicals like you're supposed to. And how often do we hear this, guys? I feel achy, I'm tired, I feel like I'm pushing a thought through Jell-O, I'm 40 pounds overweight, I have no self-esteem or sex drive, and oh yeah, I'm gassy, I'm bloated, I've got constipation and or diarrhea.
Yeah, every
all the
single
common
day.
complaints, every single one of them. And, we often will say, and our listeners are used to us speaking in this language, it's control blood sugar, control everything. And, that statement, do you believe that? Control your blood sugar? You have the potential to control everything? Or
I think that's the crossroad, right? When you think about it, what causes people to die early are two hormones, cortisol and glucose, or glucose, insulin, and then and then cortisol. And they're interrelated, right? When cortisol goes up, right? Insulin resistance goes up because cortisol makes you keep your blood sugar up because you think you're going to fight a white tiger, right?
Right.
And those are the two things that age people. Everything else swirls around it. I am on 100% agreement with you that everything revolves around glucose. Your lipids revolve around glucose. If you're making small particle lipids and lipoprotein little a and apolipoprotein B, it isn't a Crestor deficiency.
Right. Right.
You got to get your glucose under control. And it's interesting. People are like, yeah, but do I really have to eat healthy all the time? I'm like, well, what kind of question's that? Eating healthy is an opportunity. The opportunity is for you to take care of yourself, enjoy the food that you're eating, but understand its impact on you. Right. And coming from my wife being a dietitian, my father being a chef, me being a clinical nutritionist, we came to this happy medium of understanding how to really enjoy it with him in the house. How do you enjoy food, Dad? And it tastes good and keep your blood sugar down at the same time. And you can do it. And I think the other big issue that revolves around this is movement. I mean, let's face it, this thing's, hey, 12 times a day, it's telling me to breathe.
Right. Like you needed something to tell you to breathe, right? But we do.
It's pretty scary when you think that our system is so sympathetic dominant, so cortisol driven, that we've all become a culture of shallow breathers, that our diaphragms are stuck, that we've got hiatal hernias and we're told we have GERD, when in fact we're under this excess sympathetic tone. And we have to have a stinking watch tell us, hey, don't forget. Now, here's the thing that's kind of cool. I don't know if you guys notice this. Sometimes I get kind of blue before the alarm goes off. So I got to breathe a little earlier than that. But 12 times a day, I get to do a breath. A lot of times I'm changing color. But, and then the other one is what I do like about this is heart rate variability, but heart rate in particular. If your heart rate's in the 70s, you know what? You're running from a white tiger.
We are so glad you brought that up. So
Yeah, we were
two
just
things I wanna
talking
make
about that before you got on. We're like, we've got to ask him about this.
Yes. So I want to go one direction first and then go back to that because this is really important.
Sure.
So we're speaking about wearables right now.
Yep.
So whether that be an Apple Watch or whatever,
Yeah. Sure.
lots of wearables out there. How
Yep.
do you feel about the onset of people wearing continuous glucose monitors? Are you excited about that? Is that been a positive thing?
Been a mixed bag for me. I mean, I think in general, it's really good because it makes people more aware.
Yes.
I mean, to me, blood sugar is about awareness. People don't understand, oh, I just ate, 24 servings of rice because I went to a Chinese restaurant and they give you a bucket of rice. And gee, what is that doing to my blood sugar, right? I think that's real important.
And not only what it does to blood sugar in the moment, but for 3 days, you could be dysglycemic from that one excursion, right? To your point, do I need to eat healthy all the time? What are we really trying to do?
You're so right. It's not just I'm eating a high sugar food or you're eating a food you're having a reaction to. So you'll notice when people are eating a food that they may be having a sensitivity reaction, not a full-blown allergic reaction. Two things will happen. One, their heart rate goes up. Two, their glucose can spike.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, what a lot of people don't realize is the number one thing that causes heart disease is postprandial hyperglycemia.
Yes.
We're all worried about, are you taking Lipitor or not? Are you taking an ACE inhibitor or not? Drug for the audience, a drug to help people with managing their blood pressure. And the reality is you've got the most powerful preventative tool that you can have to prevent heart disease. Our number one killer is your fork.
Yes.
True.
It's your fork. And then it's what selections I'm making. And so I like CGMs because of tracking that. I'll tell you when it didn't. Here's what's interesting, because I'm still a huge fan of CGMs. I'd use them all the time. But I'm in a military, I was educating, I'm doing work with Fort Bragg and the Department of Defense on special forces. And they said, we tried using CGMs, but we need to get blood sugars every 2 minutes because we're trying to find out blood sugar and cortisol in response to a round that like a sniper would shoot, right? And I was like, wow, I never thought of that. That because of the instantaneous duress, how does an individual respond to that? Like, say, for example, a race car driver, maybe, or anyone that could have really intense duress from moment to moment. And I was like, wow, that just took my understanding and desire to learn about glucose and stress hormones and cytokines to the next level, because I just was so happy with the normal population that I worked with. And now I was thinking, oh, wow, I'm going to have to correlate where their instantaneous heart rate HRV is with where their blood sugar and their stress hormones are, so I can understand it like with another dimension added to it, right?
Right.
So anyway, that's the only reason I had a little bit of a pause on it, because I'm like, oh yeah, for 99% of the people I see, yes, I love them. And then all of a sudden I got punched in the nose when I was down there a month ago. They're like, we couldn't use them. I'm like, oh, okay.
Well, if they would only monitor insulin and cortisol besides blood sugar, wouldn't that be amazing? But maybe that's in the future. I love that you said that too, because one of the things that prior to the ability to get on Libre View, which is the cloud version, of being able to look at more than just what their scans are, we were able to really focus on that variability, where now we can see some degree of variability.
Right.
So
that's where the magic is, where you can really start to investigate, well, why is that there at that time of day? What were you eating? What were you doing? What was going on? Yeah.
So Dr. LaValle, can you clarify just for the audience, the postprandial hyperglycemia, what that's doing to the glycocalyx and the endothelium? Like, why is that the big driver of cardiovascular disease?
So when your glucose goes up really high, there's a couple things that happen. One is you do release more cortisol. So the more you drive up your blood sugar, the more you drive cortisol production. And the more that you drive that glucose up, And then if you have a dramatic insulin response, right, you're gonna release more insulin. Insulin, is essential, but it creates a tremendous amount of inflammation in your tissue. And so the glycocalyx, of course, which is the furry lining of the endothelium, is the way I like to put it, right? It's kind of it's the endothelial lining that we now know has a brush border due to the great research by Dr. Hans Vink, incredible research. You start to create what's called more shearing stress on the glycocalyx. So you basically damage it so that now lipid particles, first of all, get inside the protective barrier. But secondly, when you're under inflammation, you make more monocytes. And when you make more monocytes, you trigger more macrophages. And there's, M2 macrophages and M1 macrophages. M1 macrophages are inflammatory, and they attack that lipid that got through the damaged glycocalyx. And see, the thing is when you're really insulin resistant, when you're making more insulin, your glucose is higher, you make BB-sized LDL cholesterol, right? That's why we measure particle size. And I try to use that as an example. If you think of the inner lining of your artery as a tennis net, and you try to throw a softball through a tennis net, it doesn't go through there. But if you throw a BB through the tennis net, it gets through there a bunch. And the more you're insulin resistant, the more you make BB-sized cholesterol. Toxic metals will do it. High stress will do it. There's different things that will create that. Low estradiol in a postmenopausal woman will do that, right?
Yes.
I can tell you that right now. And so, that BB-sized cholesterol gets in there, the macrophage attaches it, hits it. You basically rust that cholesterol. If you think about it, you have an enzyme called myeloperoxidase, and it rusts that cholesterol. It causes calcification. Now, the real problem is the interim stuff known as the vulnerable plaque that also gets produced during that. And then that is the stuff that can break off and it cause embolisms and all that kind of good stuff. But the postprandial hyperglycemia basically lights a stick of dynamite in your chemistry. And the net result of it is you blow little holes in your glycocalyx, the inner lining of your artery, which then allows the lipid to get in there. And then the immune system, which is turbocharged because of that insulin resistance, is triggering that. And you got to remember, this can happen just due to stress. So if you're under stress, your hypothalamus will tell your sympathetic nervous system to signal through the enterochromaffin cells, the enteric nervous system, to release corticotropin releasing hormone. So when I'm insulin resistant, I'm making this excitatory chemistry. Now I release all this corticotropin releasing hormone. And now let's go to the next level of why your blood sugar goes up. Now your gut gets permeable. That's the next piece. You have elevated interleukin 6. You're making more corticotropin releasing hormone. And now the tight junctions of your gut get broken.
Right.
And those broken tight junctions allow for bacteria to go through, for food that now is undigested, because under sympathetic tone, you don't digest well. And there's this little thing. I don't know if you guys have ever heard this or not, but I think you're supposed to chew your food before you swallow it. It's really weird. But when you chew your food, it actually digests. And I'm just catching on to this now. I think that's going to be the next thing on our watch. It's going to be time to chew.
Maybe it should be, because we're all in this fast pace, run from the tiger.
Nobody chews their food.
Slide into first base. Don't even sit down to eat. Don't even stop to smell our food, eat while we're preparing it. I mean, the list goes on, right? So
people don't chew their food. I still remember, if you guys have heard me talk, you've heard this story. Maybe not. But I remember I was at a phytopharmaca talk in the late 1980s. I was teaching there. And I'm in the airport at 6 a.m. You guys heard this one from me? Do you know this story?
I don't think so.
Oh, no.
Oh, you're going to love this one. All right, here we go. So at 6 a.m., and I'm just kind of staring out at at across the way from me early, just got off a long day of lecture. Next day I wake up, get on a plane. And I see a kid fold a piece of pizza in half, and he's got a Pepsi, and he takes a bite of the pizza, 6 a.m. He swallows, he like takes one bite, one chew, swallows. Like I saw the point of the pizza go down his throat, like his Adam's apple, but it got stuck because he kind of had to do the whoa, whoa, whoa. And he grabs the Pepsi in order to volume force the pizza down, right? And one of my mentors, Dr. Alexander Wood, in Richmond Hill, Canada. I used to go up to Canada to get trained a lot by him. He started the naturopath school in Ontario, Canada, actually. He used to tell me, if you do not get people to chew food, you will not correct their digestion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We can give them all the glutamine, all the aloe, all the SBI powder, the bovine serum, immunoglobulins. We're going to hit them with lorazepam and KPV and MOUSE. But we're not going to teach them, right? We're not going to tell them, hey, by the way, I need you to chew your food so we can get you out of these immune reactions that go on once you break the integrity of the gut. So people with blood sugar always have blood sugar issues, even when they're in their 90s. Look at their skin, they're growing fungus, their tongue is broken down, it's geographic. That means the mucosal barrier is broken down, it's coated. They're not diabetic yet. I just had a case. I literally just had a major executive, huge investment banker, can't lose weight, a 99, literally a 99 blood sugar. So he's right at the edge. Nobody's telling him, hey, buddy, you're already diabetic. You just don't know it.
Yeah.
That's basically, in my opinion, once you're at 99, you're already there, especially if he's got a 15 insulin, his blood pressure slightly elevated, his red blood cell magnesium's low, right? He's got bad lipid particles. All these things are adding up. And I said, stick your tongue out for me. It coated, cracked. It was just, people don't understand that when you don't control your glucose, all aspects of homeostasis in your body, like I'm a big believer in homeostasis.
Yes.
I don't think we need to turbocharge people. We need to balance people's chemistry, right?
Absolutely.
And when you do not, with glucose regulation off, there's no possibility of balance.
So we've thrown around some numbers, right? And I want to go back for the listeners, just for them to anchor this in. You go to your primary care, you have your yearly exam, they give you your blood sugar numbers. Fasting blood sugar 75 to 85 is optimal, right? Ideal, yes. Anything over 85, even 1 point above 85, you're tiptoeing into dysglycemia, right?
That's correct.
And so the
6%.
good way to see that is to get a continuous glucose monitor on and just trend yourself for a while. See what's happening, because you may be surprised. And oftentimes people will have very low blood sugars because they're pouring out all this insulin. They are in a sympathetic overdriven state and they're not yet insulin resistant, right? But they're headed there. And so they'll be the ones that have low blood sugar and they're not even aware that they have low blood sugar.
That is so true. And I think the other one is they don't understand that if you have low blood sugar, it means your postprandial spike is even higher.
Yes.
So you're actually in a very damaging moment of your metabolism when you are I was hypoglycemic. I remember passing out. I would train. I would come home. I thought it was good to eat whole wheat muffins made with honey.
Yeah.
And so I'd eat 8 of them. It was good.
Of course.
And then I would wake up drooling on my couch, wondering where the last half hour went.
Right.
And so it's so important for people they have to understand when you get hangry, when you get lightheaded, when you get sweaty, but you go and you get your blood test and your doctor says, oh, you have a 68 blood sugar, that you should be saying, oh, that's a problem.
That's a problem.
That's a big problem.
That's a problem. The other number we threw out was, or we didn't really talk about a number, but what you said, you made the statement for postprandial hyperglycemia, very high blood sugar. But I have a feeling your very high blood sugar is very different than conventional medicine, very high blood sugar. So I think we should put a number to that. Like what? And I know we can't put an absolute number, but
Thank you for asking. I don't like postprandial blood sugars over 125.
Okay.
Actually,
same.
That's what we teach.
Yeah.
I'm very picky.
Yeah.
Yep. We are.
I really don't like them over 125 at 1 hour, and at 2 hours, I want them starting to ascend to normal ranges.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So you look at degree of variability, right? So
Right.
if they started out pre-meal at 85, we talk to them about keeping that variability. 85 to 115 would be a sweet spot,
Oh,
right?
perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. No,
Definitely.
couldn't agree with you more. No, I know sometimes I sound sarcastic, but my humor comes out of being ruthlessly compassionate. I mean, I care about people. But it's like people will spend more time researching their next refrigerator, car, house purchase, outfit than they do their health.
Yep.
And you know what? You don't get to enjoy any of that stuff when you don't have your health.
Right.
And-
100%.
And so start to learn one of the most basic things you can do. And I'm so glad you guys focus on this because it just is still way underserved. People that are doing Ozempic right now don't even understand what's going on with them. They just know I shoot it in me and I lose weight, but you're losing. I'm not on the camp that you lose all lean mass. If you look at the human studies, you lose the same amount of lean mass as if you're on a low calorie medically induced diet. It's equivocal. You lose about 30% of your lean mass. That's the bottom line. Now, if you go too strong on that drug, you can increase that, right? You can accelerate the lean mass loss. But my point being is they don't even understand, well, how did I get here?
Right.
So I'm doing a big program with a group called Lifetime. Lifetime has 180 facilities across the country, 2.5 million members. And our big thing is we're creating longevity centers within there to take care of their customers within their facilities. And, of course, everybody's like GLP-1s, is it bad for fitness industry? Is it good? Well, of course it's good if you teach people how to eat lean protein, understand stress, understand that, their eating window, correct for their chemical issues so that they lose fat.
It's a tool to be used within a process of changing your lifestyle.
It's a tool in the toolbox. It's not the tool. It is a tool in the toolbox. Yes. But you're exactly right because they expect it. Just give this to me and I'm going to drop weight. But no one's corrected and they're not talking to them about correcting gut microbiome, monitoring blood sugar, eating lean and clean, teaching them even what constitutes a nutritionally, nutritional dense diet.
The other aspect of that is when we're offloading all of this fat, especially the visceral fat, it's extremely toxic. So I find that oftentimes they become very nutritionally depleted because they're not building up metabolic reserves. They're still eating sugar, And so I've seen some pretty significant train wrecks with people coming in, losing their hair, just not feeling well on therapy, despite the fact they've lost 50 pounds.
I think the whole thing about visceral fat is when you start to look at all of the metabolic actions going on. So when your blood sugar is off, here, let's teach people about the first thing. If your blood sugar is off, look down, and if you can't see your feet through your waist, you have a blood sugar problem. Now, I don't know how else to put it. I don't need to be technical with anybody. Right. I mean, the reality is when you gain weight, visceral fat and belly fat, right? And then there's other ways, right? You could have low thyroid and you gain it around your thighs and, there's all that stuff, but we only got so much time. So the reality is, okay, now I have that visceral fat. What's that mean to me? Well, it means you're going to die younger than if you didn't have it. Because you release compounds that lead to heart failure. You release a compound called resistin, which triggers left ventricle mass increase, which is basically, hey, my heart's not pumping efficiently anymore. And people with diabetes have left ventricle failure more than normal people. And so before you're even a person with a big label on your head that says you're diabetic, you're training yourself to have all of the comorbidities. You're training yourself to have a destroyed endocalyx so that your 4, 6, and 8 micron microcapillaries collapse, and now you have peripheral vascular disease, right?
Yes.
You're training your brain to not use glucose, so now you develop dementia, right? You're training the heart to end up failing. It's really, I don't know. It's devastating. I mean, I got to tell you, being from an Italian family, and I came back to my family reunion, and I'm a half breed, right? So I'm the 5'11" Italian in a 5'5" world. I feel kind of good about myself when I'm at my family reunion. Like, I'm the big guy. I'm tall. And then I go to the NBA teams I work with, and I feel like, I'm really tiny again. But I just look around, and everybody's short, and everybody's overweight, and everybody's diabetic, and everybody's got heart disease. And I think now it's not even as cultural. It's not cultural within an ethnicity. It is what we have adopted as Americans.
Right.
Yes. And what you just said a few minutes ago is that not only do you die sooner, the life that you live is not full of vibrance, right? So quality of life it's less than desirable.
Let's face it, drive around next to the donut shop. It's kind of set up this way. Next to the donut shop and the liquor shop is the dialysis center. So if you stop and you drink enough liquor, I only have a little bit of wine. Well, what's a little bit of wine? Do you have a little 5-ounce glass, or do you have a goblet? Most of the time it's the goblet, and then it's the refill. That's going to throw your sugars off. Sorry, guys. It's right. You guys know that.
We know
but the folks listening, sorry. Wine's good for you, but not that good for you.
Yeah.
And so we've adopted these whole lifestyles that lead people into dialysis. And I got to tell you, I don't think people need to go in before they become a diabetic. They should ask if they can walk into a dialysis center and look around. Mm-hmm. Because my father had to go to dialysis his last year of his life. So at 90, poorly controlled diabetic for 40 years, we did the best we could. But the last year, the kidneys just started going.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
His quality of life went from going to the VFW center, cooking for the veterans of foreign war, going to the senior center, hanging out, going to the casino, getting on the tour bus with the other retirees, right? Yeah. To every other day having to go to dialysis and spend half a day at the dialysis center. And the day in between dialysis, as you guys well know, is recovery
wiped
from
out.
dialysis.
Yeah.
That's right.
And then by the time you get through your weekend, when nobody wants to treat you, you got an extra day without the dialysis, you feel extra punky by the time you get back into dialysis. And people just think that those centers are there empty, and they're full of people that were insulin resistant through their life and diabetic. That's 90% of the people that are in there. Very few of those people were in there due to some kind of traumatic kidney injury, right? That's not it. It's you were obese, you had bad blood sugar, you had big postprandial hyperglycemia, why that damages your kidneys, right? Is that you're releasing a ton of adrenaline. The arteries to the kidneys get squeezed down, and now the blood flow to the kidneys is reduced, and you lose your filtration rate. And when you lose the filtration rate, meaning your blood can't pump through your kidneys, now that allows for more old oxidative damaged compounds to hang out and damage your kidney tissue.
And I'm super glad you mentioned that, because now we have the ability to look at kidney disease predictively using cystatin C. If we could just get others to use that, right? But kidney disease doesn't just show up either. It's almost as if they're surprised, like, wow, I have kidney disease. Like, no, you've been working on that for a long time.
Yeah, just like your heart disease, just like your depression, just like your colitis. Most of the time, you've had to work at this.
Yes.
And it's really, it's interesting. I try to give people analogies. And I say, you could be 100 feet away from the Grand Canyon and you take your next step. It's not a big deal. But if you're at the edge of the Grand Canyon and you take the same length step, it's a lot bigger deal. And the problem that we have is that people are walking to the Grand Canyon of their illness. And then there's that one last step. And now it's Yes, you have kidney disease. Yes, you're diabetic. Yes, you have heart disease. Yes, you have cancer. Yes, you have an autoimmune disorder, which always ends up kind of blending in with people with diabetes, right? I mean, how often do you see that, in a context, and not just people with type 1 diabetes, which is obviously autoimmune, but people with type 2 diabetes, their immune system's on fire.
Right. And that's if they're lucky to actually know that last step, because heart disease is silent until it's not.
That's right.
Yeah. So oftentimes, unfortunately, their first, wow, something's wrong is a big event.
Yeah. I always try to get people to go, it's like, what's the first symptom of a heart attack? 50% of the time, instant death.
Sudden death, right?
Yeah. That's right. That's right.
That's not a good sign.
That's right. So
Dr. LaValle, can we go back to talking about the GLP-1s? Because one of the things that we do, and I know that you've talked about this for many, many years, but evaluating resting heart rate, whether you're doing that with an Apple Watch or whether you're doing that with an Oura Ring or some other wearable, but trending that. And we've been using those devices in our practice for many years, trending patients. Right. And we're seeing about a 10-point increase in resting heart rate on GLP-1s.
That's right.
So what is that? Is that a vagal nerve issue? Is that a hydration issue? Like what is that? And is there a way to override that?
Yeah. So a couple things. One is it's called a baroreflex response. And it's because of it's strange, but your heart rate will temporarily go up as you start to regain control of glucose and insulin.
Okay.
Called the baroreflex.
Okay.
But you brought up a couple other things that are super important. Hydration is so important. And then if you're not, look, I still have this issue when we just give drugs to people, if they've got real high cortisol and they're really stressed out and we're not really even addressing that, we can't really appreciate that data like exchange in our body between cortisol and doing a GLP-1.
Right.
We're still learning about all of it, right? What I like about GLP-1, so if I wanted to really, raise a hand to it, right? Raise a glass of true green juice to our GLP-1s. One is it downregulates neuroinflammation and improves dendritic differentiation in neurons, right? So you get better dendritic pruning with GLP-1s. That means you're sparing that type 3 diabetes effect.
Yes, you're protecting the brain, guys. Protecting the brain.
Yeah, the microglial cells are getting downregulated. You're getting better dendritic pruning. You're rebudding your neurons better. That's one. Obviously, the data on it for heart disease risk is pretty dang solid, right? I mean, we know, no kidding, because if I'm controlling glucose better and I'm reducing my inflammatory signaling, of course, your heart disease risk is going down. Even though, I know you guys know this, I mean, the number one risk for an acute myocardial infarction isn't blood sugar, and it isn't smoking, and it isn't being obese. You know what it is?
It's not moving your body.
It's autonomic nervous system.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Autonomic nervous dysfunction is the number one.
I wish you hadn't have said that. Scott, take it back. Please take it back.
Well, you know what? When I learned that, I was like, of course. But I never thought of it, because when you lose heart rate variability, you're losing it because of excessive stress, excessive insulin, heightened noradrenaline, adrenaline signaling. And that's what causes the disorder in the endothelium in the end, right? And then you get the incoherence of your brain keeping synchronicity with your heart, right? And then boop, lights go out, circuits blow, acute event happens, right? So when you think about that whole piece, heart rate variability, so are you seeing this now? You guys are, I wish I could talk to you guys all the time, because I love how passionate you guys are in practice. I want to come be your patient. I would be loved.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my gosh.
You'd be more than speechless.
I don't know if my autonomic nervous system could handle that, Dr. LaValle.
No, I'm serious. You guys, it's so easy to see. But now you're seeing people that are training too hard for their age.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're actually overworking their nervous system because they want to train. Like if they get a 25-year-old trainer who wants to train them. Oh, hey, I just learned this cool workout, that these pro athletes use. Well, yeah, I'm a 60-year-old.
Listen, my practice is in the number one retirement community in the US. And that is, I will tell you more often than not, my patient. And getting them to understand that is so hard.
I'm glad you're seeing that because I'm seeing it a lot. And look, I just had a full body like OMA scan, which is like they measure your marbling and your fat, right?
Mm.
So I just had full body. I had DEX. I had, I had clearly scans. I did all this stuff, right? And the guy looked at me and he went, "How do you maintain how lean you are?" He goes, you're in the top 1% of the top 1% in maintaining lean mass at your age, going on 64. He said, "How do you do it? How much are you training?" And I looked at him and I said, "It's how much I don't train." How I worked out in my 20s, when I, put on a lot of mass and was a, world-class, bodybuilder, different than how I trained in my 40s, different than how I trained in my 50s, certainly different than how I trained in my 60s. And when you start to understand this little wearable watch and that CGM, between the two of those, you can predict everything that's going on in someone's chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty
Right.
much. Not the environmental burden, right? Not the
Right.
lead, mercury, arsenic, the pesticide stuff. Another topic, another day. But
Right.
basically, there is so much. And I mean, I remember having a 62-year-old retired CEO. She sold her company, uber wealthy. But now she doesn't know what to do with herself. She's going to Orange Theory twice a day. She brings in her papers to me showing her heart rate. She had her heart rate up and she came into me. Here's what she came into me for, guys. Anxiety. She had a heart rate of 202 when she was doing, this is a 62-year-old female. She should not be operating at a 202 heart rate
No,
at all. I don't encourage that in anybody.
you're right.
But nobody told her. And there's this drive to be productive instead of a drive to have a goal of longevity, which incorporate yoga, incorporate stretching. How about walking instead of worrying about doing interval runs? How about, some weighted workout? Don't overdo it, right? And how about a rest day where you do nothing?
Exactly. That's right.
Maybe you go shopping and really take care of the food you're supposed to be getting. And maybe you start to hide, you do the other things you need to do on those rest days so that what you said, creating a lifestyle that promotes health.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
for sure. We do have to get back to HRV, right? We have
Okay.
to do that. I know it's gone a little bit long, but we have to ask this question.
Okay.
Oh,
Because,
good.
you mentioned HRV, and
Right.
I know you, Kelly, and I are both wearing Oura rings. We've
Yes.
done HRV monitoring in other ways. But one of the things that we've seen with GLPs is actually a drop in HRV. And I'm trying to figure that out. I need to understand that because what you just said is improving blood sugar should improve HRV. But I'm not necessarily seeing that in my GLP-1 patients that are doing better overall in other respects.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think that what we don't know yet is because of this signaling of lean mass loss, I think we're getting some sympathetic tone. Because look, heart rate's up, HRV down. There is and I think it's initial. I don't know yet. I mean, I am trying to figure that one out too, but I think it's transitory because the one thing that I try to do so I don't see as much of it is I really dose people low on their GLP-1s.
Yeah.
So I
do
start
we.
them at like 100, like if it's semaglutide, 100 micrograms, and I go to 250. And if 250 is good, I keep them at 250. So I don't see as much swing as the person that's doing bigger doses. But I think what we're not getting yet is what the impact is on the HPA axis, like what's happening with the hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal axis globally with GLP-1s.
The jury's
Right?
out.
The jury's out. Yeah,
it
no,
sounds like
because
it
look,
sounds like we will have you back in a few months, and we will have solved this problem for the world.
well, now I'm going to work on it. So you guys have to challenge me on something. I'll go ahead and get to work. I promise you this: if you have me back, so it's like me asking for an invitation back because I enjoyed it so much. I will have the answer for you in 2 months.
I love it. We will do that. We will do that. So it sounds like for our patients on GLP-1s that we have to make sure that we are addressing their sympathetic overdriven state from day one, even before.
Yes.
I mean, I have my patients go through a 4-month program before I will even consider a GLP-1 to get their lifestyle right.
for you.
Before.
Good for you.
You know, because if we start that right away, it's addictive to them. It's easy. And again, they can eat their sugar and still see some results show up on the scale, and it's very deceiving. So I do believe in getting that foundation really nice and firm before we add that tool to the toolbox. But it sounds like really pushing the accelerator on having them be more mindful, doing their deep breathing, chewing their food, all of the things that we teach, but maybe spending more time in that area and coaching them to that from the very beginning.
Yeah. And the one thing I think I failed to mention is making sure they get, and I know you guys do this all the time, but just making sure they got adequate magnesium status.
Yeah.
I mean, number one nutrient associated with development of insulin resistance and diabetes. And that could even be one of the reasons that heart rate's going up and HRV is going down, because you're pushing the demands on the insulin receptor without possibly having the micronutrients at the cellular level to help with that homeostatic, organization of information, right? So I applaud you for taking a responsible approach to GLP-1s.
Well, we've been taught by the best, so here we are.
Well, good. I mean, I'm so serious about that, because what's happening right now is the consumer's confused, and now you're having people denied the opportunity of the benefit of GLP-1s because they don't have an understanding about them, and they have a fear now that, and it's because we don't have enough practitioners practicing the way you guys do, the way I do, which is, we want to take care of you as a whole person, clean some things up, apply this as a tool, and then you see success. And I'll bet anything, it's pretty rare that you have any side effects.
Right.
Rare. Absolutely. Rare. And you have a patient that not only feels better, but they are better. And we teach all the time that there's a huge difference between just feeling better in the short term than optimally just being better. Right. So yeah. And it's a lot more work. And I think that's the hard part. But at the end of the day, it's very rewarding work.
You know what? It's so funny. One of my sayings is your health, it's work, but it's worth it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's work, but it's worth it. And anybody that takes more time to buy their next refrigerator than to take care of their health needs to have a lobotomy and get their head readjusted.
Right.
Take more time about you, and it's going to look, it makes your life more filled with joy. You feel more self-esteem. You connect better with your significant other. You're more helpful to your community, right? All this stuff happens when you can do that. So anyway, it's good. It's really good. And I do hope you guys get out to millions of people the message of the importance of glucose control.
Absolutely. We're doing our best. So before we head off for today, is there anything else you want to put out there in the wellness community? Anything coming up? Any new books, any new promotions that you have going on in your world that we need to know about? Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I've got my new metabolic code book will be out this year. I have a performance book coming out, looking at lab biomarkers to optimize human performance for more in the sport performance category. I've got a rewrite on my book, Your Blood Never Lies, that's coming out. I just put out 6 ebooks. And then I got a bunch of lectures.
So it's jimlavalle.com, right?
Just go to jimlavalle.com.
Yeah, pretty easy.
Yeah, pretty easy. Go to jimlavalle.com and it'll talk about all that good stuff.
Sweet.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time, just spending it with us. And there has to be a part 2, maybe even a part 3, because this is honestly great conversation that people need to hear. This is really good stuff. So thank you for carving out time in your schedule to meet with us like this. And I promise you, I'll keep working on my friend. You did really good today, by the way, Kelly.
I kept it together. I'll see what my Oura ring told me about my stress level.
Hey, I'm telling you right now, you guys ask. I will come back whenever you want me to.
Awesome.
Always make time for you. You guys are amazing.
Thank you.
Well, we will take you up on it.
All right.
All right.
Sounds good.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. You can find more information about Synergy at Synergy for Life. That's SYNERGEE, 4life.com.
And then Synergy Connect is our Facebook. And then please make sure to follow us on your favorite podcast app so that you make sure you get future notifications of episodes.
The purpose of our Synergy podcast is to educate. It does not constitute medical advice. By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use this podcast as medical advice to treat any medical condition in either yourself or others, including but not limited to patients that you are treating. Please consult your own physician for any medical issues you may be having.